Rent or buy during retirement. Hey, my name is Glen James and you are watching Retire Right. Thanks for joining us. If you are new to the show, thanks for being here. This episode, it is a case study and we're going to do it a little bit differently. The first bit, I'm going to walk through the current situation and how we got to where we are right now. Then I'll invite Nathan Fradley, who has been on the podcast many times before, and he's going to have a look from a financial advice point of view. What are some options that we can do in this scenario? Now, I will say this case study, I know the daughter who I've been helping with her mum, and I've connected them previously to someone on the ground in Queensland when it was all initially going down, because effectively it is a case study on elder and financial abuse. And this, you just can't make this crap up. And I want to highlight this stuff today just so it's more of a PSA that you just are aware of this stuff. And this is so wild. It's hard to believe that there are scumbags who would rip their own mother off. Anyway, the son, and we'll talk about him, but he's a piece of dirt. Yeah, it's just disgusting, to be honest. And if this does get sent to him through the family or whatnot, I know that you are a piece of dirt. And if you want to challenge me on that, mate, give me a call. But you are a piece of work and you are a piece of dirt. Anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. So, the current situation, the name is changed. Meet Anne. Anne is retired, age 69, recently widowed. She currently rents and lives with one other person, which is the landlord. And at the time of this recording, that's changing now. So Anne is effectively looking for another place. So she's considering other options that will allow her to potentially live alone and improve her quality of life. As I said, my name is Glen James, and this is Retire Right.
This is a podcast that will help you plan and execute one of the biggest moments in your life. That's retirement. You'll learn how to set up your finances in a way that benefits you, your lifestyle goals, and keeps you in the know within this complex world of money and investing. Your host is Glen James, former financial advisor, author, and host of the popular Money, Money, Money podcast. Glen is joined by experts in various fields around the topic of retirement in Australia. Any advice in this podcast is of a general nature. Full details are in the show notes of this episode. You only retire once, so retire right.
Let's keep going. Anne and her husband were living in the family home worth $1.3 million on the Gold Coast, and it was mortgage free, and her husband passed away early in 2024. Anne has two children, a piece of crap son who's 35 years old and a daughter, 31, who is in my world. All other relatives live overseas. In her grief, Anne hastily sold the home and moved in with her son and family, who own a home in Brisbane. There was a plan to use the money to purchase a property with a granny flat for her and her son so that Anne could live close to the family but still have her own space. And face value sounds pretty good. Now, let's have a look at some other financial details here. Anne's net worth consisted of around $2 million, a combination of money from the family home and her husband's estate. So there might have been, the super proceeds and some other cash assets and whatnot. Anne and her son's relationship soured over the course of her living with him, and Anne's son kicked her out of his home, but not before manipulating her into giving him $1.8 million to purchase another house outright, solely in his name, and reneging on the plan for Anne to live with them, despite it being bought entirely with her money. So, the big problems here, you have a grieving widow You have a son who took the money from mum, bought a house in his own name. It triggers all types of drama with Centrelink for the mum because she's effectively gifted that money to the old dirtbag. But you've also taken out the younger sister from any of the will and the inheritance and any estate planning stuff. So this is such a mess. Now, with only 200K cash to her name as it stands right now today, there's no super, she needs to find a new place. Anne's daughter helped her to apply for the pension on grounds of elder abuse, seek legal support, and find rental accommodation on the Gold Coast. Anne chose to drop the legal action against her son on the premise that her son would give her back $700,000, which she had told him was a loan at the time. He did give this back when he sold the house and then he moved into the new property. You might be thinking, where was the daughter in all this? Well, the daughter was estranged from her parents by no fault of hers. There was some different family dynamics and you know how it is. Life can go on and you're not talking for a while. And when the husband died, I think the daughter had reconnected with the mum and all that stuff. And it's important to note that this dickhead who took the best part of we'll call it $1 million or more from his mum, years ago, the mum and dad actually paid for his first home in Brisbane and were giving him a stipend as well to live off. So this, grub has basically conned so much money out of his parents. And so basically, my friend, the daughter, was estranged and the mum reached out to her and the house sale was already in tow and because the mum was so still in mourning when all this went down, was potentially, and I think she says mum's mental health isn't great, has kind of come up for air. It's like, something's not right here. The son sold her car. There's some weird stuff going on. And the mum's kind of come out in a bit of clarity. It was like, hang on, I'm going to reach out to my daughter because I think I need some help here. That's when the son kicked her out. And so the daughter kind of rocked up to the party to see that, everything had been sold and the son bought a new house in his name. So, total mess. So what I want to do is just fast forward to where we're at now. And you can't, we connected them with lawyers, a financial advisor on the ground when all this was going down, when the mum has come up going, I think I've been taken advantage of. And then for whatever reason, the mum, she got $700,000 back, which she said was a loan or whatever the thing was. She's now got $900K in the bank without a house, without any furniture, without a car. And we need a plan to go forward. So what she's living on at the moment, there's no other assets, just $900K. At the moment, she's renting $320 a week, but that's about to change. So they're currently looking for a place to rent. She receives a part pension of $285 per fortnight with some rent assistance and an energy supplement. There is no car. She doesn't drive. She uses public transport and Ubers. Anne's living costs are modest and low and might be, $15K a year plus rent. She doesn't have private health insurance and she'll need a healthy emergency buffer for potential health issues. So a couple of challenges. Anne lived a very insular life prior to her husband passing. She does not have close friends. Her husband managed the finances and she retired from the workforce quite early. So learning to navigate life on her own is scary and difficult. Due to Anne's mental state, low financial literacy, and the fact that she will likely not see a financial advisor, Anne needs simple strategies and solutions as her capacity is quite low. Anne is not good with technology. Anne is skeptical of super and is likely to keep her money in cash. Now, Anne would ideally like to have a place of her own for the freedom and privacy in a property that is better suited to supporting her well-being, single level, low maintenance, ideally not in a gated complex or, hectic strata, walkable, can walk around, close to public transport and shops. She'd like to live in Labrador or Southport as she's familiar with the suburbs and it is well connected to the public transport and amenities. Anne would like to leave her daughter the majority of her remaining wealth and protect it from her son. Her will is currently set up 50-50 between her son and daughter, no power of attorney, which she may have capacity to update when her mental health improves. So there's a few questions here that we need to address, and we'll do that with the help of Nathan Fradley. Can Anne afford to buy a semi-detached 2-bed, 1-bath in Labrador outright for $700,000 to $800,000? Or will she run out of cash living off the remaining money? She's got no furniture at all. She's got nothing. If she were to buy, what would the max purchase price be? What would the max purchase price she could consider to ensure she doesn't run out of money? And she could keep a healthy balance for unexpected expenses. Should she consider just renting and not owning a house and having that money be put to work? And we're looking at $700 to $750 a week rent on the Gold Coast. Is there another option she has not considered that could tick the lifestyle and financial viability box, e.g. over 50s lifestyle resort? And what are the pros and cons of buying the home in her daughter's name or a 50-50 or any other type of solution? So lots here. And I think I was saying before, when you're going through the cloud of grief, there is no time to be selling a house. When you're going through the cloud of grief, it's really hard to litigate. And as much as we encouraged her to litigate and or formally press charges for this elder abuse, and basically was like, as long as I get my $700 back, I'm okay with that. Now, it's just so wild that this scum of the earth leech has sucked best part of $1 million off his mum, ripped her out of the house she'd been in for many years, and now she's homeless within the matter of 18 months to 2 years. Like, this is absolutely crazy. So the primary thing at the moment is to get mum settled in a temporary rental, get mum's or Anne's mental health back, get her dignity back, get her purpose back, and we'll do everything that we can here to support Anne and her daughter. And Nathan Fradley has given up some of his time to help do some modelling and scenarios just to give them that comfort to make a decision. So he's given some financial advice pro bono. So we'll leave it there. I'll have a break. When we come back, I'll have Nathan Fradley here and we'll talk about some possible solutions right after this.
If you're after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. If you would like help based on your own personal situation, head over to retireright.com.au, click Get Help, and we'd be happy to introduce you to one of our trusted professionals. Our panel of vetted financial advisors and mortgage brokers work with people all over Australia, so they can connect with you wherever you are. That's retireright.com.au and click Get Help.
Nathan Fradley, welcome back to Retire Right.
Hello, Glenn. How you doing?
Hey, look, I've just spent, best part of 15, 20 minutes walking through the case study in detail, which it probably took a bit longer than expected, but it really is important to understand where Anne is right now.
Yeah, there's definitely there's layers to this, and I think, especially when we're dealing with family matters, there's complexities that often as external experts we can empathise with, but we don't necessarily always fully understand.
Yeah. And while there has been a crime, there has been proven abuse, and we have to respect that Anne doesn't want to press charges or litigate or take it further. I would encourage her to do that, but there's just dynamics at play here that, whether it's the family dynamics, the mental health issues at the moment, that it's just beyond the scope of us right now. And that's why I wanted to chat to you about some possible solutions that could be in tow for Anne. And I will say before we hand it to you, because we do have a slide here, you are working close with the daughter, and I've connected both of you, and you've offered to give some pro bono financial advice to Anne and the daughter based on, the situation of where we're at now. So thank you so much for that, Nathan.
Yeah, look, I think this kind of work is my bread and butter. I do it all the time. But when I hear particularly awful situations like this, I will do on occasion pro bono work because it's important. It's important that people can access the advice and help they need, whether it be a initial conversation and pointing them in the right direction, or will be good to get to the end of this sort of stuff. I think pro bono is really important.
Yeah. And I will say one of the things that has happened, and I may have mentioned it, I recorded the current situation, a couple of days before we've recorded this. Nathan helped draft a letter for the daughter and for Anne to send to Centrelink, because when Anne has got the money back, obviously Centrelink's just been told, ta-da, I've got an extra $700,000 in my account, and they've just gone, click asset, and then that's why she's not getting a full pension at the moment.
Yeah, look, it's not necessarily guaranteed because it depends on how that money has moved around. But I think there's a really solid assertion here that money was from the proceeds of the sale of this house, and therefore within that 2-year window, potentially a third year, the amount of money that Anne's going to use to purchase her next home should be exempt for the assets test, still assessed under income. But I think that's just something that sometimes gets missed when there's so much going on. And it sounds like Centrelink have done a really good job in working with Anne and her family on this. I think there's one little extra detail that we can help out with, and that's going to boost that pension and that income quite considerably. So.
Yeah, and I think there is records on file at Centrelink when she did lose all the money before the $700,000 did come back, that they didn't take it as a gift. There was the financial abuse situation there. So I think, and we will get on with it, but I think it's just important that as tough as and as hard as Centrelink can be to deal with at times, when a case is actually presented to them and there's evidence of stuff, there can be some pragmatic outcomes, right?
Yeah, I've had quite a few recently where what Centrelink want to know is what's actually happened. What is the reality? They've got really good look-throughs when it comes to trusts and people changing ownership and things like that on trust, or removing themselves as trustees. So they look through that if people are trying to circumvent the system. But also when something was there and it just wasn't fully communicated well or known, they do amend that. We had a granny flat basically recognised from 3 years prior that just wasn't submitted properly recently, and Centrelink were excellent with that. So yeah, slow, but they want to know what's there and they work for the right outcome.
Yeah, cool. All right. So what we're going to do, I'm going to share the presentation points that you put together. If you are watching on YouTube, you will be able to see these. If you're listening only, that's all G. You will half of this is to keep Nathan on track, but he does have some projections that are visual as well. So I might hand it to you, Nathan, and then you can just tell me when to kind of skip to the next slide. And I might interject if there's questions about anything that you've put together.
I think the first thing with all of these kind of matters, with any complex matter, with family, with co-living arrangements, with really any financial decision, the best decision, the best choice, the best outcome is not always just the one that looks best on paper. And I think that's really important for everyone to remember. That could be considerations around the quality of the housing, location, the comfort, like do I own it, can I paint it, all that kind of stuff. It can be, when it comes to where I'm going to live, what is the services around, what's the community around me, including that proximity to family or that existing social network, proximity to healthcare and future needs from that regard, like aged care, and then safety. And obviously estate planning falls into this. So we're going to look at some slides, we're going to look at some projections, we're going to look at some numbers, but so much of the right answer is actually going to come about from Anne and her family discussing what is best for her, and her identifying more than just the financial. The financial gives us that rational basis for what then becomes that emotional decision. So it's important to flag.
Broadly speaking, the scenarios that you've run through are whether we continue to rent and invest the money elsewhere, whether we buy a house in Anne's name and potentially the granny flat provision, so buy a house in the daughter's name and potentially retirement village. Is that kind of the three or four things that we're looking at?
Yeah, we looked at the first three, and then the retirement village idea did come about as a potential opportunity, and so we were exploring that as well, and we thought it was interesting to include in this just to get. It's going to be fairly high level, I think. We could get really down in the nitty-gritty on each of these scenarios, but I think it's really good to see what options are available for people so that they can properly understand and start to discount things that just don't make sense for their situation.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's go to the next one. So this renting one, and I will say since the intro that I recorded a few days before this, Anne's daughter has secured her a rental for 6 months at $650 a week. So while this example says $750, there's been a good outcome there, Nathan, because it just allows a little bit more of a buffer space. So for the next 6 months, it's probably really important that, Anne doesn't have to rush into something now. And the daughter had to go on to the lease and whatnot, but Anne has a rental now for 6 months at $650 a week. So yeah,
which is an amazing outcome. The getting rentals later in life is getting increasingly difficult. There's all sorts of stats out there showing, be it just challenges with income and what have you, but also that there's anecdotal age discrimination and that sort of stuff in place. So I think it's great to hear that. It's giving them some time. You shouldn't be rushed into making these kind of decisions, and maybe this is the outcome that they stick with. And so if we start to look at that, well, why does renting make sense? So firstly, flexibility of location. So you get to choose where you want to be, assuming that there's rental availability. But that does come with that lack of housing security. At some point, they may say, well, we want to sell this house, rent it to a family member, move into it ourselves. We're going to move you on. But there is no maintenance costs. So there can be a lower sort of cost to live versus if that property needs a lot of maintenance. As we said, finding rental is challenging. There can be displacement issues later in life. Maybe Anne's there for 10 years and then in 11 years' time, it's time to move out. And later in life, it's even harder to find that additional rental. And then obviously, if outside of that, we've got to do something with that money that can keep pace with inflation, that can keep pace with paying that rent. She is wearing the cost of that risk versus, say, buying a house that we'll talk to in a moment. So there's a lot to that really fits in. From an estate planning perspective, this is such an important part of this scenario is protecting these assets. The housing situation isn't as much of an issue as then what do we do with that money? And I think that sort of comes in. So in this instance,
but on the renting, even at $650 a week, that's like $33,000 a year in the shade type thing. That adds up fast.
Oh yeah. And if anyone's seen the episode that Glenn and I did where we looked at some of the Centrelink rules and the ask for non-homeowners living expenses, you'll know my view on that. It's $30-something thousand. I mean, we're working at $750 here, almost $40,000 a year in rent. Keep in mind the full age pension's $30,000 plus rental allowance.
Yeah. Now, just at the top here, you've got account-based pension or APB 360 and invest 520. So there's obvious, and this is kind of taken as read that Anne's initial comments were, she's skeptical about super and whatnot. So this whole 6 month, if she is going to continue to rent, Nate, there is going to be a big educational piece, walking slowly, and it might even be, and we'll get to your projections now. I'll put them on the screen. It might even be that the projections that you've got are a best case scenario if we did get Anne's education up to speed.
And they are, yeah. So, I mentioned that last slide, but it's subject to risk knowledge and comfort, really. So, I'm no stranger to people who haven't invested before, especially at this age, learning about investing and what's going to happen. There's so much to take on. It's hard. The reason we did that was more to optimize the outlook so that it's a bit more generic for our listeners. We're working off a 50-50 portfolio, so half shares and property and half bonds and cash. Whether it's that aggressive may not be the case. Whether we look at something like annuities, all that kind of stuff, that's all considerations once we've established which direction we're walking. But for the purpose of this sort of stage, and I do this with the clients, just at a high level, to keep things as consistent as they can, what could this look like? And once we pick a direction, then we can get into those more tactical and strategic decisions around, okay, well, how do we best do that?
And that's an interesting point. So in your discussions that you will have with Anne and her daughter, it will be more looking at the non-financial side to nail that first. So it's like, no, I think I'll feel better if I own, or I think I'll feel better if I'm in a retirement village, or I think I'll feel better if the house is in the daughter's name, or I think I'll feel better if, and then once you've really locked that down, well, the numbers in all the scenarios don't really matter because at the end of the day, Anne's got to sleep at night.
We could have the best looking financial outcomes on paper in the world, but if Anne's not comfortable in the scenario she's in, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So
this here on the screen, can you just talk us through up to age 89, if Anne was to rent? You've obviously indexed rent and done all that jazz.
Yep.
So at 89, there is still some money in her estate if the money was invested.
Yeah, so this is basically the 360 years. Hey, can we get some into super right now? What else do we do with the rest of it? We invest it. And it was all a 50-50 sort of that balanced approach. And that, that will pay out over time. She'll draw down on it over time. Her pension will increase as those assets decrease. All of those things play out. And this is what it looks like over that long period of time. And this is working on $750 a week, not $650. So giving a little bit of room for that rental market just in case. And keeping 20 grand at all times available if she needs it. So, in this scenario, she's wearing all that risk. We say she's going to have those investments, the ups and downs. This assumes a very linear run. But the point being, she has enough assets to afford $750 a week for the, until 89 and it'll continue on from there. This scenario does work. It does work. I think in the short term, it's a great play, but in the long term, it does work.
Yeah, because we do get a lot of people that watch the show that comment about renting in retirement. And the numbers stack up, but the things that we can't control is the security if the situation of the property owner changes and you could be caught in a pinch.
Yeah, I think I've heard some fantastic stories over the years from other advisors and friends of clients. I've had one client that's done this, people that travel for a number of years, house sitting, farm sitting, that kind of stuff. And they do that for 10 years. And that could be a great option. But I think when you're getting later in life, having housing security is really important. Having somewhere that's safe and maintained well. And I think for a lot of people that does come up. But you can rent. This could be a scenario where potentially she rented from her daughter. Her daughter might have gone and bought the property that might give her some additional security.
Yeah, okay. So, I didn't think about that.
There's different ways, but it's. I think the one, I suppose, catch with it is that money in super from an estate planning perspective. That if she sets the beneficiaries up and keeps them up to date, that can be exempt from the estate. It's a non-estate asset. That can go directly to her daughter or whoever she wants it to go. The rest of that cash is a little trickier. And there's probably some discussions with a lawyer around potential trusts or things like that.
They do need to get the estate planning documents sorted, and the daughter probably needs to be power of attorney at some point. And it's a whole other discussion. But if someone's mental health isn't 100%, so we look at depression and anxiety, I would imagine that doesn't tick the box of not a sound mind, provided that in the moment they are, because you can be depressed and understand that, if I die, I want the money to go here. So I think it's more getting Anne in the right headspace to come up for air and actually discuss this stuff.
I think the fact that she has somewhere to live for 6 months will do so much of that heavy lifting.
Yeah.
that just takes that pressure off. It takes the pressure off the whole family, the situation. They're going into Christmas, and then that means we can have the discussion. Having depression, anxiety, or mental health challenges does not preclude you from giving consent to a lawyer.
Yes.
I think that's where the lawyers will do a great job in identifying if there is a risk there. Does she
Unless
really
it
know
was
that
that
kind of
bad
stuff?
that they couldn't function, which
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
can happen. All right, let's have a look at the next scenario, buying.
So buying is as it sounds. She goes and buys a house. So we looked in the same kind of area that she wanted to live, therefore renting and buying. And there was quite a range, but I think $750 as an assumption allows her to get something decent. We're talking like a 2-bedroom unit, decent sized living and kitchen area, a little patio or porch out the back. It's a really nice kind of outcome for her in retirement. Obviously, owning it is important. Having a security, which is the contrast to renting, participating in any asset growth, which might feed some of that estate planning, but there's going to be maintenance and upkeep costs. There's going to be additional costs associated with it. So obviously property selection and all those kinds of things is really important.
Yeah, we're probably not buying a 800 square meter block with lawns and gardens.
Yeah.
Potentially, unless she likes doing that type of maintenance.
Yeah, but how long can she do it for as well? And then obviously there's does the house need work, or do we need to renovate it? Does it need restumping? All of those fun things that new homeowners go through. We don't want to have those challenges with this. You probably want to keep it as simple as possible.
And just as a sidebar, like I think Anne's 69, which isn't old. Like my parents have just knocked over 71, 72-ish, and they moved from a house into an apartment, didn't like it, and have moved back out into another house that has less maintenance. So you can get a freehold property, and particularly in some of these newer estates where the house fills up the whole block, that can be low maintenance as well.
Yeah, 100%. There's so much variation in that. You guys have got the property podcasts on your channel. People can just tune in and learn more about it there. But I think that's key, like what's going to work for Anne. One of the interesting factors around that doesn't come up as – it can work in the renting scenario, but it doesn't work in the retirement village one, is that support could live with her.
Yeah.
And I think this is an interesting thing where potentially you could branch into all sorts of conversations around co-ownership, maybe buying a house in both owning it together with her and her daughter or something like that. But the ability for someone to live there and support her later in life, and she's only 69, could have advantages from an aged care perspective if they were a protected person. So that's something that does come about with the home side that can be quite beneficial. And from an estate planning perspective, if it was a co-ownership scenario, depending on how you structure it, it might not be an estate asset, but otherwise it's still going to have those same challenges. But there is an interesting exemption for the homeowner exemption under Centrelink rules that the home you live in can be held by a trust. So there's a couple more things you've got to meet and prove in order to make sure that goes through. It's not as easy as just having it and living in it. But that's something that we'll be exploring and talking to lawyers about as well during this process, because that might add to that sort of estate planning protection piece as well.
Now, one thing, I'm just doing some quick mental maths. $750 for the home, $108,000 in an account-based pension. That gets us to $850. Cash reserve, clipping almost $9. You have included in your numbers some stamp duty and also maybe a little bit of furniture.
Legal fees.
And legal fees and all that rats and mice stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it does. There is a clip out of that. Obviously, it's a transaction cost of buying.
Yeah.
If she doesn't like the apartment and she wants to get a bigger house, there's a transaction cost in doing that kind of stuff. So, renting where you want to live, make sure you're comfortable. I always recommend that with sea changes and tree changes and that kind of stuff. Rent before you buy, because once you do, you've got those transaction costs and they can really eat into your capital.
Now, on the buy scenario, you've talked about aged care considerations. What's that? In terms of the home value cap more so?
Yeah, and I think this is when we're doing all of these kind of decisions, we don't just want to look at the immediate 12 months. We want to look at the long term. We want to look at the broader implications. And so if this is where she's going to reside for the rest of her life, what happens if she needs care? And in this instance, the house itself, while it's valued at $750, when you enter care, if there's no protected person living in it, which I mentioned before, they use a capped value, and it's $210,555 at the time of recording, and that changes over time. But what that means is you could have a $3 million house, but for the purpose of calculating the whatever means tested fees you've got, depending on when you entered, they cap the value of that at 210. So if we compare that to, say, the scenarios around renting or scenarios we'll get afterwards, it does mean you've got less assets for assessment. So you might end up paying lower fees, which, comes with some potential cost advantages.
Yeah, right. All right, so let's have a look at the projections here for home ownership. I mean, all the bar graphs look a lot higher if we were buying. What's the main thing behind that?
The scale on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
That's the main driver. It looks great because I've removed the house from the numbers. So she's got
more is more,
she's got $100 and something thousand. And I suppose she's not going to get rent assist because she owns it. She's going to be in a full pension. She's going to live on that pension. In all the scenarios where I've used a little bit more than I've used the ASA modest and then added on an additional $5,000 in the scenario for a bit of house maintenance.
Yeah.
So it's still a very modest living, but realistically, she's got the capital of $100 or so thousand there. If she needs it, she's not really going to draw down on it, and that's just going to tick along. The asset value itself does not include the house. If the house is going up, you might see that line flatten or even increase as well.
Now, I think when we look at the soft elements of the situation, it would almost be an easier sell from someone who had lived at a house mortgage-free for many years. It would be an easier sell to say, okay, you've got this money now, Anne, probably buy would be better because, and go with me, Nath, the reason is there's we don't need to educate about setting up super and investing the money, and the government pension is just going to be an annuity that won't decrease. And there are so much soft benefits, particularly in the landscape. And that's why it's important that, when we talk about these granny flat stuff, that could be the winner in terms of, the estate planning stuff. And just on the buy here, buying outright, if there are sharks like the dickhead's son, may he, get what's coming to him at some point in this life from, ripping mothers off. If there are some things, then it's a matter of, okay, so if we're owning this, it's either in a trust or the granny's flat provisions or in the daughter's name.
Yeah, potentially. So if she
because could you imagine, if it was in her name, you just want to minimize a challenge on the estate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest challenge with this one and the renting one. If that estate planning is such a high priority, the way you structure it now really plays into that. So if there's no consideration for him in the will at all, he could come after and challenge it. He could come after if there's consideration too, but he could validly challenge it. The stress that puts on the family, the stress that puts on the scenario, we talk about pressing charges. Going through any form of litigation is awful and expensive, and so you've really got to consider that in light of these scenarios.
Because he's already effectively ripped off the best part of $1 million from his sister as well. When you look at the broader estate planning stuff, because in all my conversations with the sister and in hearing from Anne, there was no thing that she was donating $1 million to the local dog shelter, like it was going to go to the children. So, craziness. All right, let's have a look now at this retirement village. Now, when we talk about retirement village, I'll let you go through it. So, yeah.
These can be excellent and they can be terrible. My view on them can come across as very negative because I need people to understand there's a lot to this transaction. But I've worked with quite a few clients who've had fantastic outcomes with retirement villages, and I think they can be really good options. So this is one of the reasons they can be really good is they offer a low entry point. So in this case, after we started chatting about this, it came up a potential opportunity for one at $200,000 to enter. And I thought,
sign me up, $200,000, let's go, baby.
House for life, for $200,000. I thought, let's run it and see.
Right.
But these range all the way up from there. You can pay full price, but generally in the same area, a similar size unit, you're probably paying less to have one of these than you are to buy it outright due to demand and restrictions on who can actually live in them. and also the nature of the contract. So I think that can be a level point, and there's even scenarios where they'll negotiate lower entry for lower exit costs for people who don't have the money. So that there's but I think the key to these is they're not regulated like an aged care facility is. There's no standardized contracts. These are just commercial arrangements between you and someone else.
They're broadly a land lease, though, aren't they? You get the right to live there for 99 years or something like that.
Broadly, yeah. They can differ. They can have their own rules. But broadly speaking, you get to live there as long as you live there. You sometimes can participate in the what it sells for later when you move out. But that really depends. There's been some interesting cases in Victoria on that recently as to whether or not that's allowed. They can have some really good social and community needs, having people around you. I think I've mentioned a story on one of the episodes we've done together of the woman who had no one and has now got a community. And she's got this group of girls she does fish and chip shot night with, and that group of girls that she has, she plays pool with, and these people she does happy hour with, and she's just living her dream life there. And it's amazing. So there can be a lot of that. That adds a lot of value to the family. Loneliness is an epidemic, and this can really help with that. And they can also have some, personal security systems, buttons around the neck, buttons around the house if someone has a fall or something goes wrong. And sometimes they do have internal support at home facilities. So they will have workers that do all of the home care stuff, but that creates some familiarity. They might have an aged care facility next door that can create some transition. But I think it's important to note they're not aged care. Sometimes they position themselves that way, and they can be quite expensive from a regular cost and an entry or exit cost perspective as well. I think that's really important to highlight. So in looking at in some of these, I've mentioned some of the fees here, but for those listening, maintenance fees generally between $300 and $800 a month. There's usually some form of exit arrangement. So once you're there for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, you pay up to 35% of what you put in to leave. Sometimes they offer those up front. You might pay 25% now, and it means you don't get pay later, and that can have good reasons behind it as well. There's so much complexity. Like
I think with the retirement village stuff, people light their hair on fire sometimes when it's considered, but it's like the whole investment bond chat in the financial world. It's one of those solutions where the pendulum will swing to really, really good and absolutely tick every box, or really, really bad and not really tick any boxes. So I just think it's if the shoe fits, often it's not about the money with this stuff. It's about the softer stuff like the security, the social stuff and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And with proper planning, if you're paying less to move into one of these, we can do some stuff with annuities and things like that to give security of income, and you can have a really good, comfortable, high standard of living. But I would always say, if anyone's looking at doing them, always get a legal advice on those contracts.
Yeah, do not sign anything with retirement village or leaseholds or anything like that without getting a lawyer to look at it, because you will get spanked either at the start, during, or after. So the numbers that you crunched here, so it was a $200K initial purchase price, keeping 20 grand in the bank for cash, investing 320 and throwing 110,000.
I think it should have been the other way around.
Yeah, it's the other way around. I was going to say Nathan put these slides together so you can sue him for typos. Yeah. And it was rushed this time of year.
Hey, can we do this? Yeah, we can do this.
We can do it. We'll fit it in.
Christmas.
Last episode I'm recording of the year, so
yeah. If you think continuity with the other scenarios, as much as we can into super, invest the rest. That's the broad brush we're looking at here.
Okay, cool.
$200,000 on the purchase. This one had $82 a week of maintenance fees, social and community benefits, 5 different ways that you could cut the contract.
Right.
So that adds additional complexity to it as well. They had entry fees, exit fees. They had no entry fee, full exit fee. They had participating in returns or not. They did all sorts of stuff. Actually, the website was very clear, which was nice to see. And there, is potential in some of these for care continuity as well, if they've got aged care on site. But in this circumstance that we were looking at, one of the reasons I found this really interesting, Glenn, is because of the value of the house or of the retirement village. This is known as a special residence. Retirement villages are known as a special residence for Social Security purposes.
Yes.
And if a special residence is under what we call the extra allowable amount, which is currently $258,000, which is the difference between the assets test homeowner and non-homeowner, if you want to work out where it comes from, then you're considered a known homeowner. So what we've effectively got here is a scenario where she has different rules applied to her for assets tested or income tests when we're looking at it from a homeowner or non-homeowner perspective. So I think that was an interesting thing just to call out. Obviously, this place at $200,000, you're probably thinking, what's she getting for $200,000?
Yeah.
It's not very big. It's a studio. It's a hotel room. So I think that's a really important. We go back to that first slide. We go back to all these discussions. Like, is she going to be comfortable living in one room with her bed and her kitchenette and her lounge all in the same place? Can she have people over? Can she do anything? That's going to be one of those things.
And she might, but I think from everything we've talked about, it's probably, between that and renting, pick the worst outcome in this situation or the non-desirable outcome.
Yeah, it looks great on paper. It looks fine, but I just think from a living scenario.
Yeah. And I mean, the numbers that you crunch that you'll show her, money's also not a problem.
It lasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to us about the granny flat provisions, because I'm really, really interested in this one because, and I'll be personally telling Anne's daughter to lean into this one when Anne gets advice from you, just because I think it ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, so granny flats, kind of like what you said before around when it works, it works. If we've got the right reasons for granny flat scenarios to work, they're fantastic. And if they're not, they don't work. So really, I think the first thing to clarify, and we've talked about this on the eps before, but a granny flat is not just a shack out the back. It's not just a drop of property on the back of the daughter's property and away we go. It is a consideration for gifting exemption for Centrelink, and there's some ATO rules and there's some legal contracts. Effectively, it is the exchange of assets for the right to live somewhere for the rest of your life. That's what we're talking about. It doesn't have to be a separate premises on the lot. In fact, it doesn't have to be a scenario where the daughter lives in the same house. So
what you're saying is the 800K, we'll call it 800K, so maybe a 750 purchase price with some stamp, that the house gets purchased in the daughter's name, and there's contracts involved that she's got the right to live there, all that stuff. All that gets sent to Centrelink, and Centrelink will still pay a full pension. And is that the long and the short of it?
Yeah, you say this is, and we'll work through the numbers in a second, but this is the entry contribution that we're making, and this is how much we can make that can be exempt from gifting provisions, and therefore doesn't count as her assets anymore. And
now,
so then that's how it works.
On the gifting provisions, is there you mentioned 800K, but could there be a granny flat arrangement that was $3 million?
Well, let's talk to that a little bit in a second.
Yeah.
But I think a couple of really quick points before we jump into the details. Firstly, there is a Centrelink and an ATO definition, and they are slightly different.
Right.
Which is always fun. There's a weird blank spot but for people who are not disabled under 67 that kind of doesn't quite work. And the reason is Centrelink want to see it from an assets perspective. The ATO used to consider that transfer of money as what we called a D1 capital gains event, which means it was fully taxable and the person who received it was like income.
Right.
So no one did these because they would pay 47% tax on
But that's
on that
been
gift.
put to bed now.
Providing you meet the definitions for the ATO, there's an exemption for that. So that's
for
great.
the definitions for Centrelink, there's an ATO exemption, or
No, so there's Centrelink rules that you've got to meet, and then there's ATO rules you've got to meet. They're two separate sets of rules.
Right.
So if providing you've got, one of them is contracted. If it's in a contract, then it's exempt. It's one of the things. To be exempt
So
from
it's
the
not
ATO.
onerous.
No, it's not. It's not onerous. Or it can't be a commercial arrangement. The daughter can't be profiting off this.
It's got to be a legitimate thing. Yeah.
It's fine to do so. It's just be really careful. Sometimes, do we need to really contract it? Not if you don't want to pay an enormous amount of tax.
Well, with that dickhead floating around in the background, we're going to be doing everything to protect Anne and her daughter.
Yeah. So EPOA rules, so enduring power of attorney, if anyone does look at doing this and they want to do it and they are the power of attorney, just remember that there's There's restrictions around gifting and whether or not you can even do it in the first place. There's restrictions around conflicts of interest, and there's a lot to it if the person who is giving the money doesn't have capacity. And I think a really important one for the daughter in this scenario is viability. If she's going out and buying a $1.5 million house because that's near her and it's what she's going to, and then mum moves into that and she gets this money and she pays off half the mortgage because can she afford to keep paying that mortgage? Can she afford this scenario afterwards? If she says, yes, I will care for you, for the rest of your life, what does that do to her life? Does it fit with her world?
No. So based on that example you just said then, that was on the basis of buying a house higher than the cash amount. Yeah. Which we'll take that off the table completely.
Yeah. But I think for people that are tuning in and wondering about this kind of stuff, there is two sides to this transaction. It's got to work, right? There's so much to that.
What's the 5-year rule?
5-year rule is that you can't it can't be ended. The arrangement can't be ended within 5 years for a reason that could have been foreseeable.
Okay, so it just carves out health and death, or
Oh, if you're about to separate as a couple and you've let mum move in and then you have separated, that kind of stuff. And there's some guidance that they've given around what is reasonable versus what wouldn't be. But obviously, if someone got diagnosed with dementia and then you decide to do one of these, that will probably be considered. So, and then family dynamics, family law. There's a large gift going ahead. How do you protect that if you've got a partner or businesses and all that kind of fun stuff? Estate planning, contingency planning. There's a lot to these, but let's jump into the scenario and kind of make it real.
Okay.
So in this instance, they could live together. They could also be separate. It doesn't have to be in the same house.
Yeah, it will be separate categorically with this one.
Yeah. So what that might mean is that the daughter could buy a unit and then and could give up to, in this instance, $802,066, so $800,000.
Right.
And that's based off what we call the reasonableness test. So to answer your question before, could it be a $3 million granny flat? Kind of. The reasonableness test kicks in when you try and value a granny flat. If Anne had a $3 million house and gave that house to her daughter, just that house, not $1 more, that could also fit in as a granny flat provision and fall outside of the reasonableness test and actually be okay.
Right, but when you've got a cash pot and no existing house?
Then it has to be the reasonableness test. That's how we value it. Yep.
Okay, cool.
But the house doesn't have to cost the amount that she gives. So there's going to be a conversation here on, if we bought it for $750,000, does she take the whole $802,000 or does she leave mum with the extra money?
Okay, this is good. So what you're saying is we could buy a $700,000 house in the daughter's name, and in theory, the rest of the money, even if there was $200,000, could also get transferred to the daughter's name. And even if the daughter had a separate bank account that just put mum's money and it's protected, and if she doesn't spend it because they don't need it, and if mum needs anything, lump summy or holidays, or to protect it from, the mum having a vulnerable conversation with the son because he's still circling like a shark, this could actually be an option for all money to go in the daughter's name, quote unquote, up to the 800 to protect it. And then we don't have to use the power of attorney stuff.
So remember that she can give whatever money she wants.
That's correct.
Right? And we've seen that already. And then what they look at is the Centrelink will say, well, how much of this is deprived and therefore counts as her money for 5 years? And what Centrelink have done already by the sounds of it is they've said, well, this was an elder abuse situation and therefore we're not going to count the rest of that money as deprived. We're just going to remove it from your pool. So in this instance, let's say she gave a full $900,000 across to her daughter. Of that, $802,000 would be exempt due to the granny flat rules. The other $98,000 would be deprived. So it would count as Anne's money
for 5 years.
For 5 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's a real conversation around how do you, what do I need? How are we going to do this? So much of this is practical. How are we going to manage it? How are we going to pay bills? Who's going to pay for what? What are you going to do with the money? What's coming for the pension? Who are you contributing for? All of that stuff now, and then later, what if I need care? What if I need services? How do we do that? How do we fund that? There's a lot of practical consideration that can be included or not included in contracts.
I think, and this is going to come back to Anne getting settled in the rental for the next 6 months, getting on top of her mental health, and, because you look at it, over the last 2 years, husband's died, we've sold the house that we owned outright, moved in with the son bought another property, son reneged and kicked mum out, sold her car, Anne was living with a stranger, and just December 25 had to move out into a new rental. Like, this is, I'm sorry,
a lot of displacement.
This is a lot of stuff that's happening within 2 years, either financially, forget the grief, or grieving, forget the financial. Whatever way you look at this, the next few months of getting Anne settled into her own space is going to do wonders for her. Then she can come up for air, hopefully with the daughter who's been kind enough to step in and help again. And I even text the daughter just last week, Nathan, after we had our preliminary chat, Anne had another glitch or something like that with her mental health, or we don't know. And I said to the daughter, you need to step in and actually ask or tell your mum, do you want my help or not? Because mum got in contact with the son again, or the vice versa, and wasn't taking the daughter's calls. And if daughter was out there looking for rentals for mum. And these type of financial family dynamics we can't really address, but the whole thing's just a mess, and Anne needs her own space to come up for air, hopefully get her mental health. And that's what I mean. The daughter didn't have to do all this because Anne hadn't respected the daughter's time for whatever reasons leading up to this. And I do have grace for mental health stuff and grief, but this whole thing has been a bit of a mess, Nathan. And I told the daughter, I'm like, you need to make a decision whether you're helping or you're not for your own sanity.
And I think that is a really important factor in the granny flat situation, because what you are doing is you are committing to the rest of that person's life. You'll provide them with accommodation, or that accommodation, or it could be any accommodation depending how you word the agreement. And if that in the next 5 years, something that could be foreseeable, that there's something goes on with the son and, this, that and the other, and then she's not talking to her anymore, and then she moves out of the house, and Centrelink will turn around and they will go, well, you should have known about that. These assets are now deprived, and they will go all the way back to the start date, and they will issue a.
But if we did do the granny flat provisions and the daughter owned the house, and there was a contract, if the son got in the mum's ear again, even if she wasn't going through a good time mentally, realistically, the son can't do anything because nothing's in the mum's name. It would be more the mum begging the daughter to sell, or I don't know, like, how do you protect people from their own scumbag children who will get a sniff of a dollar?
There is, I suppose, people have their own agency and they will do what they will do, and a lot of the time it's not in their own best interest. And I think you can't. This is the bit we can't understand, and it is the bit of hesitancy I have. One of these scenarios in this case is that if it gets broken early, you just end up with a bill from Centrelink, and you've spent the time, effort, money, and energy on. Now she's got this house that she's bought for mum. She's got to pay back all this Centrelink money. That money's got to come from somewhere, go back to mum. You've got to unwind it. What if she can't sell the property? What has been a downturn at that moment in the market? Now she's stuck with this house, and she's got to fork out for this mortgage, and all of these things factor in. I think
it's going to hinge on Anne getting in her own space and the daughter really encouraging the mental health treatment and getting back to somewhat normal life, because this will be the first time Anne's had her own space for close to 2 years.
Yeah. There's so much of this is about not rushing. It's about not rushing. And I think, the rental scenario in the short term is great because she's got some form of security there, and if you can get an extension month to month or something, awesome. Yeah. But if this works, if the relationship is such that this can be trusted as a good outcome and provided for, a granny flat can be a really good tool. A granny flat situation can be a really good tool because what it does it removes the assets from mum's name altogether.
And that's what we just need to protect idiots from swooping in.
Yeah, there's nothing in the estate to be challenged for. That money's not there anymore, so it's not hers. It becomes the daughter's.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that, from a estate planning perspective, has some benefits. From a Centrelink perspective and a home care and an aged care perspective, can have a lot of benefits
and a shark
as well.
benefit. So basically, there's no point showing any projections with this because there's going to be no money in mum's name, only the full Centrelink benefit.
Yeah, correct.
Right. Okay. So you've got a slide here, aged care, with some scenarios.
Yeah, this was more just to demonstrate practically what that aged care outlook could be.
Yeah.
It's quite hypothetical. In option A, we have retirement village. In option B, we have retirement village. That could also be rent. That could be another one of the scenarios. I think the key is that in those A and B, she has assets at 80.
Yeah.
Versus in C, under a granny flat arrangement, there are no assets. So what does this do from an aged care fee perspective down the track? So if someone went into care today at 80 with the assets that Anne is projected to have at 80, what does that look like? So, in this scenario, we've got proceeds of the home at $130,000 because we took off 35% exit fees on that $200,000. She's got her investment assets. She's got some cash. She's getting a decent whack of pension, not a full one, and some investment income. And she's moved into care, so she pays a basic daily fee and she pays some of her means-tested costs, hotelling and non-clinical care contributions. And then she also has the accommodation costs, which are the interest on the unpaid RAD. And I've assumed a $550 RAD in this instance. That's the accommodation costs. All up, $75,000. Now, we could sell some of those investments and pay that onto the RAD. We can get about $440 on there, leaving her a bit of cash. Decreases the accommodation fee quite considerably because there's less interest. But there's still retention. They keep 2% of whatever you put on there per year. It's still going to be $50,000 in fees in total. If she goes in with no assets because of a granny flat arrangement, she goes in as a fully supported person. She just pays the basic daily fee. So it's $23,000. So this is often a driver for the broader decision is we'll take care of mum. Mum moves in. We'll pay a lot of the costs. We'll keep everything happy, healthy. And then we know as well that when mum goes into care, and we've said we're going to make sure she's taken care of as long as possible, often avoiding getting into aged care. But should she need to, we're not having to fork out $500,000 for mum to go in. It actually works out in our favour.
Man, I'm not... I mean, just everything I know about this situation, surely the absolute discussion needs to be on the granny flat provisions for every reason. I mean, how would you rank it in order of knowing everything that we know? You'd likely, and tell me if I'm wrong, in terms of priority that would tick the financial box and all the other issues box, granny flat provision, then buying in own name, then probably retirement village, because at least you've got the continuity of living in the same place, then renting.
Yeah, I'd say the retirement village is more because it's so small. I think that'll be quite challenging.
But that's not to say they couldn't drop $350, $400 on a retirement village.
Yeah. I think the one catch for me is, and this is whether it works, is will this actually work? And we're not going to know that straight away. Anna needs some time. She needs to recoup. We need to see how this plays out with the sharks. I think that's to have security to know, is this going to work? We need to have tested some of that time, both to give her some space to think. But the last thing we want to do is enter this and it breaking in a year's time because, the sun gets in Anna's ear.
And that's it. If Anne's not going through a good mental health stage and the sharks reached out and, the son can do no wrong, clearly the comments and the help of the daughter are just disregarded. It's just such a mess.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest threat to the granny flat. Everything says, hey, this looks like a really good outcome, but it has to be, as I said, the stars have to be aligned with granny flats, and that's the bit that I would want. I would want everyone to be comfortable with, and knowing what the impact of that would be. I think it's really important.
I think the granny flat and Anne's daughter being power of attorney.
Yeah,
Like,
but we still have a wild card of what if Anne just left? What if they had a falling out? What if she wanted to do something, the daughter didn't agree with it? She got up and she went back to the son, and
yeah, and that was kind of,
that's the bit that it's
just
like,
last week when I was texting the daughter, I'm like, look, you're doing so much here, and it's really hard when people aren't strong in a mental health sense. You can't talk reason to people, and I'm like, I don't know, it's family, man, isn't it? It's just the dynamics in this situation are so wild, and there's a whole heap of backstory here that it's really not relevant, but it adds color to the dynamics. And I'm just saying to the daughter, there might still come a time where it's like, Mum, do you want my help or not? But hopefully the mum continues to want the help and her mental health gets better.
Yeah, that's the driver and all of that. It's not financial.
Yeah. So, look, we might leave it there. Thank you so much for walking through those scenarios. I think it's been great for a lot of people to consider, regardless of the family dynamics. If someone rocked up at retirement with just money in their super, they've still got four broad things, right? Do we buy, do we rent, do we retirement village, or do we granny flat it? And the only thing on the granny flat provisions, maybe we might actually swing around and do another detailed episode on this. It can get tricky if there was other siblings involved, potentially with estate planning stuff, but that would get caught out in the agreement anyway, wouldn't it? Or do you put it in both kids' names or three kids' names?
Yeah, it depends on how you want to structure it. This scenario is the case we've run is for this scenario. I think if you're dealing with happy families where you've got someone living close to the parents and they're going to do largely most of the caring, but there's other money, and that's a scenario where everyone should be in the meeting. That's a scenario where we should have family meetings where everyone knows what's going on, so that they can't turn around later and say, well, I didn't know, but also so that estates are rebalanced. Now, I will say a granny flat is not an early inheritance, because you are also impacting your own financial situation, your choice and flexibility in future to do what you need to do. You are being compensated for that, but there can be some balancing factors from an inheritance perspective, and that's managed at a family level. Yeah, talk about that for episodes on episodes.
Yeah, well, hopefully once you get on a joint meeting with Anne and her daughter, maybe having a third party adult in the room like yourself actually could be the lightning rod of, oh, okay, this is not normal that my son stole $1 million and all that stuff. And yeah. Gosh. All right.
It's tricky.
If you have any type of complex advice requirements, you can go to nathanfradley.com.au, reach out. He'll have a chat with you, point you in the right direction. If he can help you, he certainly will. If he can't, he certainly won't. But on behalf of Anne's daughter and Anne, thank you so much for giving up your time to walk them through this crazy scenario.
Of course.
Thank you, Nathan Fradley. All right, friends, remember, if you found this useful, please share it with a friend or family member. And remember, you only retire once, so make sure you retire right. Bye.
Any advice is general financial advice only, which does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Because of that, you should consider if the advice is appropriate to you and your needs before acting on the information. If you do choose to buy a financial product, read the Product Disclosure Statement, PDS, and Target Market Determination, TMD, and obtain appropriate financial advice tailored to your needs. Simo Interactive, Pty Ltd, and Glen James are authorised representatives of Money Sherpa Pty Ltd, which holds Financial Services Licence 451289. Martin McGrath, Financial Edge Group, and its employed financial advisors are authorised representatives of Synchron Advice, AFSL 243313. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs, and not those of the hosts, the publisher, or their respective licence holders.